This is the James Crepea Show.
Most of the time, just eat, play, sleep, and then just do it again.
Oregon Duck beat reporter for the Oregonian, James Crepea.
Yeah, hopefully we have some big wins early this season. You know, that'll mean you've been a better commissioner.
He graduated from Ohio State and covered Auburn. We'll try not to hold it against him. KORE 1050 and 95.7, Fox Sports Eugene. Here is the James Crepea Show, presented by Dairy Mart.
Hit the lights and lock the doors. Welcome, everybody, to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene on this Monday, September the 23rd. I am James Crepea, the Oregon Ducks beat reporter for the Oregonian and OregonLive. I want to thank Steve Mims of the Register Guard, who filled in for me on Friday's show when I was in transit to the Bay Area and Palo Alto, and technically I was staying in Redwood City. So appreciate him filling in, and we were able to get those picks in. At the end of Friday's show, we'll go over the accountability. Spoiler alert, I did best. Steve here fared about 50-50. And Mims, Mims will get a chance to redeem himself this Friday. Let's put it that way. But we'll get to the exact accountability later on. Today's guests, we will have Andy Staples will be joining us for the first time. I've joined Andy several times. He obviously used to be of Sports Illustrated, now with The Athletic. He'll be joining us at the bottom of the hour to kind of go over a little bit of a national perspective of both of the Pac-12 and nationally as a whole, and things that are going on within the Pac-12 and USC and UCLA and, yes, Oregon as well. But a lot of things with him. We'll start the 5 o'clock hour with Ralph Russo of the AP. Also joined Ralph's show at times, so he's going to be joining the show for the first time. Also, similarly, a lot of things nationally going on. We'll chat with both of them about the situation in Houston today, which has really captivated the college football world. A lot going on. We'll get into that more at length with both of them, but bottom line, long story short, both Houston's quarterback and number 2 receiver, both one a senior with a year of eligibility to go, another actually both seniors with years of eligibility to go, choosing to sit out the rest of the season, but return being the caveat. So we will get into that with both Andy and Ralph, because I, on the beat level, but they, from a national level, always take on the issues in college sports, in particular in college football, with commissioners and in the offseason at spring meetings with coaches and these things. And the 4-game redshirt rule was something that we've all dealt with in telling stories the past couple of years. Well, nobody really ever foresaw this. We all knew there was going to be fallout. We all knew that players would use it to their advantage to potentially leave and look elsewhere. But I don't know if you could have ever found somebody who would have thought, I think there's going to be, a pair of teammates in their senior seasons who are going to choose to, 4 games into that season, when the season's not going so well, sit out and come back. That part, I don't think very many people thought was going to be part of the equation. So we'll chat with Andy and Ralph about that, as I say, at 4:30 and 5 o'clock. And Nick Daschel will join us at 5:30 to go over the latest with Oregon State as they prepare to take on Stanford on Saturday, coming off their open week. So we will get the latest by way of personnel and things like that from Nick at 5:30. But we start today with the Ducks and their 21-6 win over Stanford on Saturday. No, it was not going to set any records. No, it isn't going to go down in the annals of Oregon football history as the sexiest win. No, it's not going to go down from a stylistic standpoint. By any means being considered great fodder in that realm, offensively speaking. Defensively, yeah, it was awfully good. Defensively, it was borderline tremendous. Frankly, what the Oregon Ducks defense did in holding Colby Parkinson completely out of the box score was nothing short of stunning. But all that aside, I came away from Saturday perplexed and at times downright frustrated. Not with what I was watching on the field. I don't care, again, if the team wins or loses. Doesn't matter to me. Ain't changing my life very much, other than the bowl destination I get sent to cover. It's not impacting me. No, I was frustrated and perplexed by the reaction that I was seeing from the masses. And the masses that include those in the media, fellow reporters. It left me asking the question of, does anyone in the Pac-12 conference, all fans, this is not just directed at Oregon fans, do media in the Pac-12 actually like the game of football? Do they enjoy the game of football, of college football? And the reason why I ask that is because all I hear, especially the past few months, I won't go back to all last year. That's not entirely the case. But especially the last few months is, all I hear is griping. The 9 a.m. kickoff idea. No, the game's too early. Can't do that. Impossible. That'd be terrible. Worst thing in the world. Pac-12 after dark. Nope, game's too late. Can't do that. Worst thing in the world. Pac-12 network coverage is awful. All right, there you have a point. Everything is terrible about Pac-12 refs. Right there, you might have something.
Quite a bit.
You might have something to that.
Yeah.
Might have something to that. Though how they ended the Cal Ole Miss game, the decision was right, other than they should have gone to replay. Other than I understand why they didn't, but as I made the statement coming out late last night at 1 o'clock in the morning Eastern, that was probably the worst thing of the whole thing. But anyway, there's too much replay. Get rid of instant replay. I will never understand that. To me, I think the whole idea is to get the call right, but there's too much replaying. This game is boring. This offense isn't good enough. This defense isn't good enough. Again, everyone just wants to gripe about something. If I wanted to hear nothing but negativity, griping and pissing and moaning from something I invest so much time in and that I'm supposed to enjoy, I'd be married. I would. Because all my married friends, that's all they tell me about. Men and women, by the way. That's not directed at one sex or the other. Because believe me, plenty of my buddies, their wives will rip them a new one. But if all I wanted to hear was just negativity and how this is the worst thing in the world every time, every day, boy, I know where I could sign up. Look, sometimes in the game of football, the other team, you know what? They're allowed to play too. It's called competition. They're allowed to care. They're allowed to give a damn. If we weren't on the radio, there's a coach saying it's called the giver factor. They have a high giver factor.
Bleep.
And Stanford, of all teams in this league, Stanford, Utah, and yes, now, under the culture that Mario Cristobal is trying to put in at Oregon, are probably the three teams with the top giver factor. If you thought that Oregon was going to go down to Palo Alto and just throttle Stanford on its field a week after it went down to Orlando and got crushed, and you thought that, right, Oregon has an even better quarterback than that, 2 freshman quarterbacks have lit them up, so therefore Oregon's got to go out there and put up 50 points, otherwise it's going to be a disappointment. If you really thought that was going to happen, you entered the day, you were going to be disappointed. I'm sorry. There was no way around that. Because the number one thing that dictated how that game is going to get played Saturday was the opening coin toss. The instant that Stanford won the coin toss and said, no, we want the ball. We'll take that, thank you. That dictated how the first half, at minimum, was going to be played. Because what they clearly spent the week on, because they are a team that is coached by a 9-year head coach with pride, who gets more out of those players than virtually any other coach could get out of the same players. They care. They give a damn. What David Shaw's plan of attack very clearly was, no, I'm sorry, we're Stanford. We're going to get back to doing what we do. We're going to get back to playing possession offense. We're going to get back to playing hard-nosed football. Things that Stanford was not able to do the prior 2 weeks. Did in the opener. An opener where, yes, they also lost KJ Costello to a hit, but they did that in the opener. They've obviously done that for damn near a decade. All right, they didn't do it for 2 weeks against 2 freshman quarterbacks. You're absolutely right. The only way that you can get a team like Stanford to stop playing the way it wants to play is to, 1, probably start off with the lead in the first place, and 2, to maximize every single opportunity offensively so that the score gets so bent out of whack that a team who wants to play possession football can't afford to waste that much time. UCF did that. USC did that. Credit to them. Credit to them. And they had 2 freshman quarterbacks. Credit to them. Which also, by the way, makes it awfully difficult for Stanford. because they don't have very much tape to go off of either one of those guys. But you know what USC and UCF also have besides freshman quarterbacks? Pretty talented wide receiver cores. Really talented wide receiver cores. USC's might actually be the most talented wide receiver core in the league. You know what Oregon's number one lacking position is right now because of injury? Wide receiver. And the wide receivers actually did pretty good on Saturday. But the point is, Stanford went out there from the jump and said, we are going to play a certain way. Now, your defense doesn't have to allow that to happen. And by the by, Oregon's defense didn't. In terms of yards and scoring. And again, they took Colby Parkinson, all 6'7" of them, completely out of the game. Which will go down as one of the top accomplishments of the entire game, if not of the entire season, by the time we'll look back at it. But that's going to get overlooked by everybody because the offense didn't put up 45, 50 points. I don't understand that. Not when the opposition is Stanford, not when they're intent on playing a certain way, not when their opening drive goes 12 plays for 61 yards in over 6 minutes. And no, 3-0 clearly is hardly insurmountable. But Oregon gets the lead on a very quick strike drive. It's 7-3. Takes all 35 seconds there, late in, well, kind of mid first quarter. Stanford's following drives in the second, 8 plays, 23 yards in 5 minutes and 15 seconds. Even after Oregon drives the field and takes 4 minutes off in their own regard. Down 14-3, Stanford still went 9 plays for 30 yards in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. In back-to-back possessions, they went 53 yards on 17 plays in 10 minutes. And you're walking away disappointed because your team didn't put up 40 or 50 points? You can't control that. And by the way, if you go out and score at will and try to break their back doing that, you're only going to throw your defense back on the field. Stanford had 4 big plays in the game. They were all sacks. They all came on separate possessions, and they all ended up in Oregon punts. And let's not glaze over Blake Maimone's contributions on Saturday, because he, up until the final touchdown, was the player of the game. And that's not a knock on Justin Herbert. The most valuable player on that field Saturday, until Herbert threw the third touchdown, the second to Breeland, where it makes 21-3, until that point, Maimone was the most important player on the field because he was pinning Stanford deep inside its own 15 all day. Even the last one that technically goes down is not inside the 20, went out at the 20. But you can't walk away from a 21-6 road win to a team that had beaten you 3 straight years and was intent at playing possession football, which is its identity from time immemorial, and come away going, offense is no good. Offense sucks. Marcus Arroyo's a terrible play caller. Yeah, because, he dialed up the play that said, yeah, let's get Justin Herbert sacked. You're right. That's what he was doing from the box. He said, things are going a little bit too good here. Let me dial up the play where our tight end misses a block and Herbert goes down. That's what Arroyo was thinking. Look, I understand that this is a fan base that has a very big cultural war internally. There is a significant portion, if not the overwhelming majority, of the Oregon fan base that only wants things as they used to be. And glazes over the down years of only a couple of years ago to only remember about a decade or so ago. And that it's a fan base that is largely chasing ghosts of a bygone era, of when Chip Kelly was here, and it was the blur, and how everything was video game numbers offensively. And who cared about discipline? who cared about penalties, and who cared about defense. It never mattered when you were winning 70-65. But if that's the brand of football you want to see, and that's the brand of football that you want your team to play, and that's fine. I'm not knocking it. If that's your cup of tea, then you have to question your allegiance right now. But if you want to pull for Oregon, and you still want to be an Oregon fan, because this coaching staff ain't going anywhere, this is what the identity of this team is. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to grind out every game like this, but when they're playing certain teams, Stanford and Utah among them, unless their offense is able to go out there and score, like I say, every single possession, which is completely unrealistic of any team, then you're going to have a couple of games that are grind out kind of games. Yes, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. But if you give me the option of what do you want to watch objectively, because again, I could give a damn who wins and loses. Doesn't mean that I don't relish in certain people's misery. But if you give me the option of what would you rather watch, the 21-6 Oregon-Stanford game or the broken scoreboard UCLA-Wazoo game Saturday night, I know which game I'm taking. And maybe I'm at odds with the masses, not just in the Oregon fan base. Maybe I'm at odds with masses in the Pac-12. Maybe I'm at odds with the masses out there in general. Because there are a lot of people out there who thought the future of the NFL was the Rams-Chiefs game and that was the best game in the NFL last season. Didn't win anybody a Super Bowl. For one team, didn't even get them to the Super Bowl. But there are a lot of people who think, hey, it's the way it goes. All right. Hey, it's okay. And there are a lot of people who want to watch the Warriors play a certain way in the NBA. I don't know. Maybe I'm old school. Maybe, though I'm relatively young, but old at heart, and went to a Big Ten school with 3 yards and a cloud of dust and all that, maybe I'm just a dinosaur.
It's not the end of the world, James.
But good grief, man. Your quarterback completes over 70% of his passes. Some of them flat out incredible throws. Again, to me, the throw of the night wasn't even the throw to Breland for the first touchdown. To me, the throw of the night was from the right hash on a left out to Addison when he's being defended by Paulson Adebo. That's as far a throw in that kind of confined space as one could reasonably ask for. But no, rather than looking for those things, it's only the fact that I'm not a sunshine pumper, folks. I'm not sitting here telling you that everything Oregon's offense did was spectacular. I'm not telling you that there aren't maybe some underlying issues in the run game. All I'm saying is that if your only takeaway from a 21-6 win over on the road to open Pac-12 play, when you're favored by 2 touchdowns that you cover against a team who's beaten you for 3 straight years and who plays to an identity for over a decade that it absolutely was intent on playing in on Saturday, I'm not the only one who feels this way. Take a look at what was written about the game on Saturday from those outside of the Pac-12 footprint, and it's basically the same way that I'm looking at it. Hey, this is a grind-out game. You played Stanford. And I know that Stanford may not be a Stanford teams of yore. They may not be as good as they used to be. This may be a step back. This may be even a losing season. But that doesn't mean I still don't get to respect David Shaw and that his players don't get to give a damn. They still get to play. They still get to fight. So for those who just wanted everything to be perfect and for Oregon to win by 35-plus points and rub Stanford's nose in it, hey, I understand it. That's fans. That's great. I love fans' passion. Respect fans' passion. But there's a difference between passion and desire for your team to have overwhelming success, but then there's disconnect between that yearning and accepting certain levels of reality within a game. There are opponents where if it were 21-6, I would go, oh, man, boy, they're, That's not good.
Arizona
would be one of them. There are teams where defenses don't have a pulse, where you go, oh my. And look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Stanford's defense is incredible. I know what the statistics were heading into it. I'm just providing some context for you that in week 1 when they played Northwestern, who, look, that might not be a great Northwestern team. It might not. I'm going through a very large sample of David Shaw's entire tenure and telling you Stanford has always played this way. You know this. And when it opened the game wanting to play that way and comes up with a couple of sacks to derail Oregon drives, Oregon had 5 drives in the first half. 5. It scored on 2. The other 2 had sacks, and the other one ended the half. Where even I said at the time, well, with the timeouts and the way it goes, all right, you run it once. Stanford's got 2 timeouts. You can kind of see how far you get. Maybe you take a vertical shot, try to get a PI, whatever. But ultimately, it's 14-3. You could go into the half in that way. You could just go to half. I wouldn't knock it. Me, personally, maybe that would be a chance that I would think about being aggressive, being that I also get the ball to start the second half. And if I can score here, even a field goal, and get it to 17-3, I have a chance to end it at the beginning of the third quarter and break their back and will to play a possession game. Mario chose not to do it. Now, because we didn't get the chance to ask every single question after Saturday's game, when we talk to him on Wednesday, I'll ask him about that because he's talked about times of when he wants to be aggressive and not. And it doesn't mean that he made a bad decision. He just chose not to in that instance. But when you're up by 2 scores, I can't rip it because you're getting the ball back to start the second half. But when the defense is playing that well, again, I can't look at it and go, the only takeaway is, oh, well, because the run game wasn't stunningly, overwhelmingly great, then therefore it's a miserable disaster. I can't look at it that way. I don't know. And again, I'm not playing defense for the coaching staff. And it doesn't bother me one way or another whether a team wins or loses. But the disconnect between understanding that one team wants to play football a certain way and the other team has to adapt to that and figure out its best means of attacking it in order to win on the road. Because let me tell you, one, you better start understanding that because Oregon fans who weren't there on Saturday at Stanford, you should have been able to see how elated Oregon's players were after that game. And not just the defense, who had a lot of reasons to be elated. If you could have seen the overwhelming joy and satisfaction from those players and those coaches. And I'm not, I know, hey, look, after any win, it could be like that. No. I've walked off fields where I've looked at coaches who looked like they needed Pepto-Bismol, and I've gone, you won. And they looked like they were having heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, and every other symptom.
I don't know why you always want to be negative with every question.
But, folks, I'm sorry. I can't, on a 21-6 road win and a game where you're favored by 2 touchdowns and cover against a team like Stanford, I'm willing to accept that some games are going to be a grinding game. That may also have some issues along the way, but that a win can look like a grinding win. Now, if that makes me a dinosaur, okay. I'll accept that. I'll take that criticism. And if you want to argue to the contrary, that's fine. And you can give us a call on the Davis Roofing Hotline and tell me I'm an idiot. Give us a call at 541-343-KORE and tell me I'm wrong for everything and that I should jump on the board and the bandwagon of the 67-63 who gives a damn about defense football game. But look, they're not the only program taking criticism. Northwestern taking criticism. Pat Fitzgerald taking criticism. Now, his team lost. Lost to Michigan State. And they're doing exactly a whole lot of points. I thought what Pat Fitzgerald today had, what he had to say today regarding some criticism was fantastic. Not just for him, but I think if Mario Cristobal had said it, or if Marcus Arroyo had said it, or if virtually any coach, but in particular after this weekend, could not be more apropos. Here's what Fitzgerald had to say at his press conference today.
Well, we just take 90 hours and play Wii and golf all week. I mean, what do you think? Yeah, I go into every game plan expecting it to work, to be quite honest with you. I understand there's 40,000 experts on Twitter that can call plays for me. So my email address is #I don't care. Okay, so shoot that out. We got to be better, and we're going to work to be better. So anybody that's negative, I respect it, and I don't care. We have to improve, and you do that by working. And we've got some youngins that we got to just continue to coach. We got to help them with our calls. There were some calls that definitely we feel as we look back on all three phases in each game that we look back and go, why did we think that was going to work and it didn't work? And we hold ourselves accountable first. But anything beyond that, to me, is just fanaticism. I don't have time for that.
In the 5 o'clock hour, we will have our weekly Who Got Sauced. Always our look back basically at who had the worst week, during which we will take calls and we will take a pick of who had the worst week. And if you give us the winner, in our opinion, the best pick, you'll get a $25 gift card to Chicken Bones. So basically a free dinner out of it. So that will be our giveaway. Again, that will be during the 5 o'clock hour. We will open the 5 o'clock hour with Ralph Russo of the AP. He'll be joining us, getting a bit of a national perspective from him. I know he was at the game at USC Friday night. So we'll chat with him. And again, also with Nick Daschel, covers Oregon State for the Oregonian and OregonLive. My colleague there. We'll chat with him to get the latest on the Beavers at 5:30 as well. We'll be chatting with Andy Staples from The Athletic here in a few minutes and get a kind of a national perspective from him on a few things. For one, before we do chat with Andy, again, reminder that, yes, we will have the Who Got Sauce segment during the 5 o'clock hour, but some just news and notes from the Pac-12 earlier today. There was the Player of the Week announcements. So Oregon's Penei Sewell, obviously the left tackle, and defensive end Gus Cumberlander, they both were recognized as the offensive and defensive linemen of the week for the Pac-12. So wanted to get that mentioned out there. I wrote about that, and that's up on OregonLive.com, some of the just deeper details there. Now, some of the players of the week within the conference elsewhere. Offensive player of the week was Dorian Thompson-Robinson of UCLA. Obviously, the ridiculous scoring that was in that game. The voters for it, myself included, in that group, though I did not vote for Thompson-Robinson, but I guess the rest of the group did. Call me crazy. I went for the young man who threw 9 touchdowns, whose team lost, but nevertheless. Evan Weaver got Defensive Player of the Week for what was another career high in tackles for him. I think it was 22 tackles for him in Cal's win at Ole Miss. UCLA's Demetric Felton won Special Teams Player of the Week. I also did not vote for him. I voted, full disclosure, I voted for Maimone because, again, I thought he had, as special teams go, while a return touchdown, as Demetric Felton had, was a very big play. It was one play, and a one play in a game that, quite honestly, one play was not the deciding factor in that game, whereas Maimone made many plays on special teams that were extremely important to the outcome of the game on Saturday. So that's why I voted there, but Felton gets the Special Teams Player of the Week, and Kyle Phillips of UCLA gets the Pac-12 Freshman of the Week honors there. So those your Pac-12 Players of the Week. And we will go to Andy Staples, as I say, just in a couple of minutes. You are listening to the James Crepea Show on Fox Sports Eugene. We now welcome to the show for the first time Mr. Andy Staples of The Athletic. Obviously used to do some fine work over at Sports Illustrated, now most recently joining The Athletic. Welcome to the show, Andy.
How you doing, James?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good. Looking forward to eventually seeing you out here on the West Coast at some point for one of these games coming up, because Oregon's got a few left that are going to be pretty good.
I'd say the home stretch is coming up, and I think it probably will be sooner rather than later.
Yes.
That you will see me.
Yes. Let's start outside the Pac-12 first, though, because the news of the day, certainly, in the college football realm, being this ongoing situation at Houston, which is just flat out strange, that I'm not sure any of us who had followed and chronicled the 4-game redshirt rules thought process ever thought we'd see something like this, where a senior quarterback and senior wide receiver in Derek King and Keith Corbin, you could argue the two best players on Houston's offense, after 4 games of a 1-3 season, choosing to sit out the remainder of the year, but return to Houston. What is your view of this situation?
Well, they don't have to return. I mean, well, I think Corbin probably would need to. I don't think he's as close to his degree as Derek is. Derek can get a degree and go anywhere he wants to next season, but he may want to continue playing with his teammates. So I do know there's been some consternation from him because this is his 3rd head coach, his 4th offensive coordinator. He's never really had a chance to develop. He's always been thrown into one thing or another. I mean, he took one for the team when he was a freshman and played slot receiver because they needed somebody. So, I mean, he's a guy that's done everything they've asked of him, and all they've done is kind of kick him in the teeth over and over again. So I don't think it's an unreasonable request to say, you know what, the dream senior season I was hoping to have isn't going to happen, and all I want to do is win a conference championship here, which was his main goal. How about let's try again next year? How about let me play for a coach for a couple of years and maybe have the same offense for a couple of years?
The only problem with it, Andy, being that, and hey, as long as, and as you're quick to point out, yeah, King and Corbin could both, if they both fulfill their degrees before the start of next season. The selling point of the day is that they're both going to return, and that's all part of some master plan. But if they both were to if King in particular were to choose to leave to go to the NFL, even if off of a very limited sample.
Oh, he's not going to the NFL.
I would doubt it.
He left to go play quarterback somewhere else.
Or to go be, or go be grad transfers elsewhere, then this whole thing looks even worse. But let's assume and let's give for the benefit of doubt that that this is all part of a plan for them and Dana Holgorsen to reset this whole thing for 2020. What have you just told the other 83 guys on that roster about the rest of this season?
Oh, it may not be very good, but it's already not very good. So I don't know that changes much.
Beyond the success or failure, though, is it not kind of like, I mean, frankly, yeah, this is the top quarterback and one of the top receivers, basically, like, not just bad,
well,
it could be giving up.
They got a guy who coached at West Virginia last year. Do you think he told his West Virginia recruits he's going to be coaching at Houston in the year?
Well, that's a fair point. That's a fair point.
I mean,
that's a fair point.
So we do the things that are best for us, and sometimes that doesn't work out well for other people.
And this is a roster, to be fair, that does not have, outside of these two, does not have a whole heck of a lot of seniors. So for seniors who are going to finish out the year,
play with him.
Yeah.
And if you're one of the juniors, you're like, oh, well, I know we got a quarterback next year.
That is the selling point. Yeah, that you're right there. That.
Yeah. So you're letting down and disappointing, I think, probably a few people who were, in your class who you came in with. But my guess is those people also understand where Derek King's coming from. This is different now. If he leaves and goes somewhere else, they will probably not be so understanding.
That for sure. Yeah.
If he comes back as he says he's going to, then and if he's practicing and helping out with the quarterbacks all through this season, then I don't see a problem.
Well, I was going to say, if I'm on that defense, I better see him on scout team every single snap from here on out. He better be giving me all he's got left.
I don't know if he's on a scout team or coaching.
One or the other, something. I want to see. I mean, don't just check out and tell me, well, because I'm not playing the rest of the year, I don't give a damn. Like, again, for those juniors, be happy about it.
That's not how he's going to handle this. That's having met Derek King. I can't imagine that's how that goes.
Oh, sure. And again, you're someone who has. I've not met him, so I'm not making the assumption that he's taken that approach. I'm just speaking from the perspective of if I'm on the defense, and while I'm happy about next year that things certainly could look very bright with these two coming back, that, hey, you're still the one who has to go out there for the rest of this season that's not going to be very good, and you're the one battling through a season that's not particularly great. That I would hope to see my teammates, even if they're choosing to come back, and that's exciting, that they still put forth the effort. And if Derek King's somebody who's going to do it, then that's great. That's awesome. It's just a strange situation where I don't think any of us really foresaw this being a potential situation where guys were going to choose to sit out but return.
No, they didn't. It's funny how the coaches only thought it would benefit them and never thought about how it might actually benefit the players when they made this rule.
You got a point there. And we're chatting with Andy Staples of The Athletic. Let's get to the Pac-12 specifically, Andy. Obviously, the landscape of the league, quite different. And frankly, of all the power leagues, this might be the one that has the most different landscape relative to how the season started for its top teams. Cal is the only one left undefeated. Oregon is the highest ranked, though that's not that big a change. USC, left for dead a week ago, is now not so dead. Utah may be a pretender. Washington got a loss to that Cal team, but otherwise is still pretty legitimate. And others are kind of all over the map. ASU has the best win in the entire league, but also just takes a clunker of a loss. UCLA looked like a disaster for weeks, but now just got a nice road win. Washington State was doing well offensively and actually looked competent on defense until this past week. What's your view of the league as a whole, in particular at the top of it, where things are a little bit jumbled at the moment?
Well, I mean, it looks like you got to play some defense now to win the Pac-12 because Oregon's defense has been fantastic for most of the year. Washington has been pretty good defensively since Chris Peterson's been there. Cal is fantastic on defense. I mean, that's kind of Justin Wilcox's calling card, and they're really cashing it in, and now are looking at being a contender. I mean, they've gone to Washington and won already. That's a pretty big chip to have right now. So I think it's fascinating because you do have to play some defense to win, UCLA, Washington State notwithstanding. So what does that mean going forward? Well, it also means who has the most dynamic offense opposite a good defense. I think that's probably Oregon. So I think it bodes well for Oregon the rest of the way, and I think Oregon is probably, if you took them out of the Pac-12, the best shot at making some noise against somebody else. I don't know that happens now because of the loss to Auburn, but they do seem best equipped for that because they do have a dynamic quarterback. They do have a very good offensive line. The defense, I've been very pleasantly surprised. I think, in year one, Andy Avalos has done a very good job.
You speak to that, and that brings me to the next question, Andy. Being Oregon-Stanford was a close, grinding game that ultimately Oregon favored by 2 touchdowns, wins by 2 touchdowns, 21-6. But if you poll this fan base, all they want to talk about is how the offense didn't score enough points and the run game didn't have enough success, and they have all kinds of questions and qualms. Then the polar opposite, you allude to, UCLA, Wazoo, all the offense, none of the defense, some boneheaded coaching decisions that were all over the place.
Which would you rather have?
And I answered that earlier in the show, and I think I'm against what the masses in Eugene, Oregon feel, but give me your perspective. You have a team that put forth one heck of an effort.
Let me explain it from the perspective of a former beat writer covering a team that had a fan base that was very similar. So I used to cover the University of Florida, and Florida fans post Steve Spurrier were never happy unless Florida beat teams 50-12. If you didn't beat them that way, then it wasn't good enough. So Urban Meyer gets to Florida, and he doesn't win that way. He plays a little more grinding style, and they hated it. And even as he's winning his first national title at Florida, they're still complaining because he's not winning by enough. It's not, just bombs every play. It's not 4 verticals all the time. And he's like, look, the game's changed. Even Steve Spurrier doesn't run that offense anymore because he was South Carolina at the time. But nobody understood that. They wanted it to be exactly like it was when Steve Spurrier coached there, and nothing else was going to satisfy them. After 2 national titles, they were okay with the way Meyer did it. So if Mario can win a couple Pac-12 titles, I think everybody's going to be okay with that style. And look, I don't think he wants to play a complete grinding. I don't think he wanted that game to be 21-6. He probably would rather have been 42-6. But look, a 2-touchdown win is a 2-touchdown win. You're going to take it.
Right, especially when the opponent is Stanford, who is known for playing possession football and was very intent on doing that.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's how I opened the show arguing, because, but again, folks who just don't even want to look at that, don't care that the other team has pride and wants to play a certain way. They only care about that end result, and that's fine. That's what makes them fans.
And you look at Oregon's offense; it was pretty efficient.
Yes.
I mean,
thank you.
5.9 yards a play, over 10 yards an attempt for Herbert. That's not bad, especially against a defense that was loading up to stop the run.
It's good to hear that I'm not insane, Andy. Thank you for making my points for me. Thank you. Let's go elsewhere in the Pac-12. Obviously, it was a very pivotal Friday night game, though ugly as all sin. But it was a pivotal for Clay Helton and his tenure, pivotal for Utah and whether or not they were going to be able to compete in the South. Doesn't decide entirely one way or another, but certainly gives the Trojans a head up. What does the outcome of that game that USC wins, and obviously now Utah could be maybe without their quarterback and or running back, perhaps this week against Wazoo, but that's for later in the week to determine. But what does it mean to Clay Helton and SC that he got that win?
I think it's pretty huge for Clay Helton, and it's interesting because he did it with his third-string quarterback. And if, let's say, Matt Fink gets hurt in their next game, I don't know, like, if you play Helton, then you've got the built-in excuse of, what was I supposed to do? I didn't choose for all the quarterbacks to get hurt. And the Utah game was weird because really it came down to Utah double covering Michael Pittman, but neither of the DBs that were double covering actually doing any covering. And so you had these odd, huge plays. Meanwhile, nothing else is working for either team. It was so strange. It was such a strange game. But, you know, look, Clay Helton may get out of this. He very well might, because if you can beat Utah, you can win the South. And if you can win the South, then I think he has a shot, which is interesting because I feel like that whole fan base is completely checked out. And I don't know how excited they're going to be if he does pull this out. But maybe instead of being mad that he pulls it out, be happy they're winning, and maybe then things will really get better.
No kidding, because I think a potential reset, because let's put it this way, as you know, unless that fan base gets Urban Meyer, which I don't think happens even if they do fire Clay Helton, to be honest, I'm not sure they're ever going to be satisfied. So I don't know if the answer is blowing it up is automatically going to lead to success. I don't. I'm not convinced that it will. Nor am I convinced that he's going to get fired. But that's the
I don't know. I mean, they haven't hired an AD yet.
And that was the next question.
I think a lot of it will depend on the AD they hire.
Who do you think it will be? Because God knows the names have gotten around. But is it going to be Mark Jackson? Is that the clear-cut number one? And that's where it's headed?
Know. I don't know. It could be him. Could be Pat Chun from Washington State. Desiree Reed-Francois from UNLV is probably holding out for her alma mater, UCLA, which just opened. So I think I'm not sure. And then there's the possibility, because it is USC, that they don't hire a sitting athletic director. You know, Rick George at Colorado might be another one to consider. But, you know, if they don't hire another athletic director, they could go in the corporate world. They could go from, get somebody from the NFL. That's not necessarily like the Lynn Swann thing, who played in the NFL, but someone who's, an executive in the NFL who actually does have some athletic administration experience. I think they're going to get administrative experience. It's just a matter of whether there's going to be someone who's a sitting AD. I still think that's probably the lean, but it's also a tough job to hire for because all the stuff that's going on above the AD, just at the university, there's a lot there. And Carol Folt, the new president, who was the chancellor at North Carolina, she's basically been hired to clean that up. It may take a little while. So it would probably give some ADs pause and make them say, you know what, I think my current place may be a little safer.
Larry Scott had told John Wilner that he is, quote, open to looking at expansion of the college football playoff, which I know to many Pac-12 fans it's like, well, finally, no kidding, your league gets left out too many years.
What took you so long?
Yeah,
you should have been saying that 2 years ago. This is what I never understood, and I've asked Larry Scott this. Your job is to protect the interests of your league, not the interests of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Your league needs a better way into the college football playoff. The only way to do that is to expand it. So you should be very much in favor of it. Greg Sankey doesn't need to be in favor of it. It doesn't matter to him. He's getting a team in. John Swafford, doesn't matter to him. He's getting a team in.
As long as Dabo's at Clemson, as long as that's the case, yeah.
Yeah, if you're Larry Scott, if you're Bob Bowlesby, if you're in the Big Ten, you need to worry about it. So instead of just banging your head against the same brick wall, why not remove the wall?
Do you think we see it happen before the end of the contract in 2026?
I still don't, though. I think if there's an extreme situation like the Big Ten gets left out again, or you get multiple SEC teams again, then maybe something happens a little bit faster. But I think they'd rather not unwind all these TV deals and bowl deals and just get to the end where they can just hammer out a new deal.
It would be, in a lot of ways, it would be easier, but with the New Year's Six construction, I don't think this is creating all that many additional layers. The games are there. The sites are there. Whether or not, the money, how the money would be structured would be reinventing the wheel quite a bit. But I don't think that ESPN would cry very many tears, quite frankly, if this expanded to 8 either. I don't think.
Oh no, they'd be fine.
Yeah,
they're all happy. They're on board, but the Bulls wouldn't be particularly happy, and why anybody cares what they think, anyways, is interesting to me. But there is a little bit more to unwind out of that. Plus, you're adding a game, and you're not giving the players anymore. So that's a legitimate question that needs to be asked. So it's not as cut and dried as, okay, we're going to do 8 now. But I do think eventually they'll get to that, and they'll figure out a way to make it work for everybody. And, there will be people who will complain, and then the first time it's actually played, they're going, wow, this is so much better. Appreciate it, Andy, and good to hear that I'm not completely nuts with the view and assessment of Oregon Stanford. I haven't given any bad food advice, and I know you're far better at it than I, but I've never steered you wrong. You never steered me wrong, but I've never steered you wrong on that. So appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us, and look forward to having you on again soon. All right, appreciate it.
You're listening to the James Crepea Show on Fox Sports Eugene.
This is the James Crepea Show.
Most of the time, just eat, play, sleep, and then just do it again.
Oregon Duck beat reporter for the Oregonian, James Crepea.
Yeah, hopefully you have some big wins early this season. That'll mean you've been a better commissioner.
He graduated from Ohio State and covered Auburn. We'll try not to hold it against him. KORE 1050 and 95.7, Fox Sports Eugene. Here is the James Crepea Show, presented by Dairy Mart.
We welcome to the show college football national reporter for the Associated Press, Ralph Russo, via the Davis Roofing Hotline. You can follow him on Twitter at Ralph D. Russo AP. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, James. How are you tonight?
Good, man. Well, you spent some time out here in these parts over the weekend. We'll get to that in a moment. But certainly the national news of the day in college football being the situation at Houston, where quarterback Derek King and wide receiver Keith Corbin, the announcement being that they are both seniors, both electing to redshirt after 4 games and a 1-3 start, sit out the remainder of the season. But the reports are now that they are both choosing to return for their 5th-year senior seasons next year under Dana Holgorsen. When we were all covering this 4-game redshirt rule thought process the last couple of years, Ralph, I don't think any of us envisioned a situation quite like this. What's your assessment of what is the news of the day and really kind of bizarre situation at Houston?
Yeah, I think there's still some more explaining to do and reporting to do on this, but where it stands, it sounds like there are 2 possibilities here. One is, the kids are going to come back next year or I should say, one is basically Dana and the coaching staff sort of told the guys, listen, you can do this and you can leave after the season if you so choose, but there's also no necessarily advantage to that, right? They still both kids talked about getting their degrees, so neither has graduated yet. So neither is in position to grad transfer. So if you're in a position where you still got to get your degree, well, you don't have to play. You don't have to be part of this team, but stay here in school, get your degree, and let's see what happens next year, right? And let's see where you are, where we are. But, you don't necessarily have to make the decision to leave right now. And I imagine that was certainly had to be part of it because, a lot of coaches are basically sort of telling kids, like, hey, if you want to go find another offer, that's fine. If you want to see what your market's like, that's fine, but you have an open door here. Now, nobody's done it during the season, and that's essentially the situation that sort of it looked like there. The other thing is I do wonder how much of this is, and this sounds weird, but is this like a college tanking? Does Dana Holgorsen look at his team and say, boy, this defense really stinks. We're not going to be really good this year. If I can convince you guys to hang with me another year, next year I might have a lot of this stuff figured out. And boy, you guys both come back. You'll maybe both have some more extra time to work in this system, and we'll be ready to roll next year. But this year might be sort of out the window. So let's concentrate on next year, and we can preserve that year for you. My guess is that the truth is probably some combination of those two things, where, as much as they're saying the right things right now, these kids, I mean, listen, they're under no obligation to stay just because they said they did. So I certainly wouldn't be surprised if come December or January we find out D'Eriq King and Keith Corbin are in the transfer portal.
Yeah, and at the same time, they could enter and they could turn right around, see what their options are, and then choose to ultimately come back to Houston anyway. It just is. You're right. There's so many questions to unfurl here, and I don't think it's done yet. You're right, Ralph, because this just seems flat out bizarre. As I chatted with Andy Staples in the last hour, my big thing is, all right, fine, even if you build up that really junior-laden defense with the promise of, well, they're going to be coming back, well, that gives me a lot of hope and optimism for 2020 if I'm on that team. But if I'm playing defense in particular for the rest of 2019, what did you just tell me? What's the message?
Right. And I also, you also start wondering, like, again, who are the kids talking to? And that's not to say like the parents don't have the kids' best interest in mind, but how many different messages are they getting here? Where, you have Holgorsen who, and everybody will sort of tell you, oh no, we're trying to do what's best for the kid. I'm sure, Dana will come out and say, we're trying to do and accommodate what's best for our players because that's what we do here. But everybody, but a coach has his own self-interest in mind. And I'm sure the family thinks of something else. The other thing I also wonder is, D'Eriq King is a guy who hasn't really been thought of as a pro prospect as a quarterback. He's a kid who's played a lot of receiver at Houston and has only been a full-time exclusive quarterback last year. So maybe what Dana is telling him is, listen, if you play for me for another year, I'll get you some skills and get you ready to play in the NFL. Dana had said that a lot in the offseason, this idea of, I wish I had him a little longer. I wish I wish they would have redshirted him so I could have had him another year. So maybe that's the selling point, because maybe the idea is this kid, and I wonder how much this is going to be the case with a lot of undersized athletic quarterbacks, because he's about 5'11" and 190 pounds, and I wonder if that's even a stretch. He looks a little Kyler Murray size, but I'm wondering if all these quarterbacks like that, smaller, pretty athletic, can move a little bit, are looking at Kyler Murray and are thinking, no. I'm not a wide receiver. I'm not a running back. I'm not a slash. I'm a quarterback because those guys play in the NFL now. So I want to be a quarterback. I want to learn how to play quarterback and do it full time. So I wonder if there's a little element of that going on here too.
To say the least, it's a plan one way or another that no matter how it ultimately unfurls a year from now, Dana Holgorsen desperately needs that to prove to be prophetic, because after very much, I wouldn't say totally orchestrating, but very much looking for a way out of West Virginia, getting it, going to Houston, the manner in which it all went down, and now pulling this in his first season in what is not going to be a good year after doing this. Boy, does this plan have to work one way or another, because if they transfer, or even if they come back, if the results are the same, boy, there are going to be some people at Houston who are not very happy about how this all has transpired. This is,
and let me add one thing, James, too. When we talk about commitment of players and things like that, like no coach orchestrated his way out of a bad situation to a better situation more than Dana Holgorsen. So I don't want to hear anything about players not being committed to teams and programs and things like that, because Holgorsen saw his best team graduate, realized I'm going to be on the hot seat in 2 years at West Virginia. That was as good a team as I'm ever going to have. I didn't win the Big 12 championship, and now I'm starting from scratch. So I don't want to be here on the hot seat in 2 years. I'm going to go to Houston and get a $4 million deal and restart my clock at $6 million for 6 years. So again, I don't want to hear players' commitment and loyalty because Holgorsen, nobody played the system better than Holgorsen. That's not a knock on him, but he absolutely played the system to get a better situation.
To the Pac-12 specifically, Ralph, where you just were, as I say, over the weekend with the Friday night game between USC and Utah. You chronicled quite a bit of it, not just the game, but also looking into Clay Helton and the precarious situation that he finds himself in. Let's start with the game specifically. What were your takeaways from what was at times a ugliest sin game, and not just because of the outcome or anything, but I mean the penalties were endless at times. It was just flat out ugly. But nevertheless, a game that SC wins, that Utah sees its quarterback and running back go down. What were your takeaways of what was supposed to be, in most people's opinion, the two best teams in the Pac-12 South on a standalone Friday night game? You come cross-country from New York to see it. What did you get to feast your eyes on? What were your takeaways from Friday night's game?
Yeah, I was amazed at how, I wasn't necessarily surprised at USC playing a sloppy, not a clean game, because that's sort of what has been their MO over the last year or so, is they have penalties and miss the, and the weird thing about USC is you watch them and you see individual players who pop, right? You see on one play, they will look great. And on the next play, they will look, especially on the defensive side, you have individual defensive players like Jackson and the Hofnaga. I mean, they got some studs around that defense, especially, but they don't play consistently from play to play. They miss a ton of assignments, but you become accustomed to that at a USC to a certain degree. I was just shocked at how absolutely shoddy, Utah played with all the penalties, not playing particularly good pass defense. You can get a ton of pressure on the quarterback. Got enough to knock Caden Slovis out of the game early, but Fink played great. But USC receivers are really good. Again, there are players and talent on USC, and essentially that's what you come away from. You come away after watching USC thinking like, there's talent here. They play hard, but they're a bit of a disjointed mess.
Boy, that's a ringing endorsement if ever there was one. But you're right. That's the thing. That's how can't you walk away from that seeing that, because that was an ugly game. To Clay Helton specifically, Ralph, and again, you captured it pretty nicely in your story for the AP, and the entirety of the situation at USC with a new president and obviously an opening at the AD position. A lot of unknowns and a lot of murkiness in that for that university and that athletic department. And by all measures, Clay Helton is, let's put the coaching part aside, he's a good guy. He's a likable guy. And a lot of things that are going on at USC right now are not very likable. Right. They're not very good. What do you think of the entirety of the situation that the university has on its hands, and what President Folt has to decide first in AD, and potentially, if the AD is not in place, with the future of Clay Helton at USC?
Yeah. So what I thought was interesting is they inaugurated Carol Folt, the newest president of USC, on Friday. So that was the beginning of the day. They had an inauguration in the morning and a football game at night with Urban Meyer in the building and Reggie Bush. There was a lot going on at USC. There was a whole lot going on at USC on Friday. But, watching the inauguration ceremony, I was just curious to see the tone of it. And the tone was, it was a little somber for what's supposed to be a celebration. They talked a lot about the very serious scandals. Even like the college admission scandal, very much embarrassing. Parents bribing their kids' way in with phony athletic profiles, but also, they had their own something of a Larry Nassar type, Michigan State type scandal with not with athletes, but with a school gynecologist who's accused of some criminal activity, sexual assault. They had a dean who was involved in criminal activity and drug use. So there are some very serious things going on at USC that have nothing to do with the football team. And trust me, football is way down on the list of issues that Carol Folt needs to fix. But what struck me as interesting is here's this school that is in the midst of an integrity crisis, and it has a football coach who is not winning enough games, but if nothing else, has brought integrity to a program that has not had a lot of that over the last 10 years. The last three full-time football coaches there were Pete Carroll, who left on the heels of an NCAA investigation, Lane Kiffin and all of his nonsense, and Steve Sarkisian and all of his issues. So they hired Clay Helton to sort of eliminate some of the drama and to be a decent person who was reliable and could be, scandal-free, and they're certainly getting that. I just find it so interesting that at a time when the school is trying to rebuild its reputation, it might kick out a football coach who is a decent man full of integrity. If we're trying to restore our integrity, but in football, that's not really going to work here. We need to win some games. So I also, the other element of that is there. Just to talk about what goes on in the football field, and you living in the Pac-10, the Pac-12 there, so you understand. It is very conceivable that USC could win 10 games. Right? Mm-hmm. It's absolutely conceivable that we could be at the Pac-12 championship game on early December, with USC playing in that game. And then what does USC do? Now, he could also make it. This could be something that answers itself, and they could go 6-6 or 7-5, and there'll be a new AD in there at some point. I'm thinking they have to get on that pretty soon. They're already behind, and they'll make a coaching change, and that'll be that. So, but I do wonder if you get into some of the gray area of a 9-win team, 10-win team, this guy who, again, has, a good reputation as being just a very decent person, is that enough to save his job?
And it is an interesting question, Ralph. It is, and I think not exactly in the same way, because frankly, I think pretty highly of Clay as a person, but this is similar in some ways to what Miami did with Randy Shannon, where that was obviously going through all the things that Miami was going through. And Shannon was graduating players, but because they weren't winning enough games, Warren Sapp and others said, nope, got to go, don't care about graduating. And that was the number one problem. He inherited an academic disaster, and all of a sudden players started graduating, and boy, Miami hasn't been the same since. So other than 1 year with a turnover chain, they haven't been the same program.
The other thing to remember out of this, too, when you start talking about all the things that are going on at USC that have nothing to do with football and the reasons why they had a change of president and Carol Folt is in there. So if they do change football coaches and Clay just doesn't get the job done and only wins 7 games or whatever, now Urban Meyer was in the building, right? And there was a little higher Urban chant, and it didn't last that long because USC won the game. So I think people were in a positive Clay mood. But there's there's a segment of the fan base that I think just sort of assumes that they will go get Urban Meyer. And I wonder, listen, I don't want to make judgments on what happened I don't want to relitigate what happened last year at Ohio State. The fact of the matter is Urban's got a resume that is a little tarnished. You can make the judgment on how much that should be and how tarnished that is. That's fine. But there is no doubt there are some marks on his resume that a school that is, again, trying to lift itself out of some nasty scandals, is that the direction that school wants to take? So I think that is also an interesting element out of all the drama that is going on at USC. And there's a ton of interest in storylines and drama going on at USC right now.
Pac-12 wide, Ralph. Obviously, you've got a team in Cal that it's the only undefeated team left in the league right now. They've got a couple of pretty big games coming up, first with Arizona State, then coming here to Oregon in a couple of weeks. Yet the Ducks are the highest-ranked team and probably missed a big opportunity against Auburn, but is being benefited by the fact that Auburn keeps winning at the moment. SC, you've already discussed. Utah definitely missed an opportunity there on Friday night, and if they are down Huntley and Moss again, then they could be in a world of hurt in the very near future. Wazoo losing in a video game score to UCLA really put themselves behind the 8 ball. What is your view of the league from afar? Because you are one of those national voices. In particular, everybody out here screams East Coast bias, and I'm an East Coast guy like you are, but I'm living out here now. But you are one of those guys, East Coast base, who watches the league. You were just here. What is your view of how this league is shaping up at the moment?
I mean, the issue is its best teams aren't separating from its middle. Like, depth is useless. We can have this argument about, well, how deep the conference is and what conference is best, and 1 to 12 we're better than you, or our middle class is better than. It doesn't matter. What you need is really good teams at the top that will separate themselves from the middle, that will beat the middle. And right now, maybe Oregon can do that. I'm not going to poo-poo the fact that Oregon has gone 3 games without allowing a touchdown. I know it hasn't been the greatest of competition, but they haven't played that kind of defense in about 100 years at Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's significant to me that Oregon is playing the type of defense that it is right now. One of these teams to have a chance to get in the playoff has to sort of take off and not lose another game. Washington or Oregon seem to be still, to me, the teams most likely to do that. I'm sure Washington is going to be kicking itself over losing Cal. There is no way in the world this thing with Cal lasts. You just can't. They're playing 1985 football. They have not had a 30-point game yet. They're the only ranked team that has not reached 30 points. Like, that just doesn't happen in today's day and age. You can't play the type of offense that they're playing and expect to continually win games. That's not to discredit what Justin Wilcox is doing. He's done a great job. They have a nasty defense, but you're not going to go reel off a 12-1 season playing the way Cal is playing. So it's Oregon or Washington. One of them has to take off, not lose another game. Do I think it's possible? Maybe. But again, Washington has already shown it has a hard time separating itself from the rest of the pack. And, can Oregon be that team that sort of, again, separates itself and doesn't stub its toe against a Washington State, which has been a problem in the last few years, or stumble against an Arizona? Because you can sell me all you want about how, well, that just proves how deep we are. But the best teams in the other conferences are getting in the playoff because they're not losing those games to those middling teams, because they're just so much better than the middling teams in their conferences.
Chatting with Ralph Russo of the AP. Again, you can follow him on Twitter at Ralph D. Russo AP. Ralph, Larry Scott had told John Wilner that he is open to looking at expansion of the college football playoff, which may be a day late and a dollar short, but better late than never on that front. What is your view of where the expansion discussion, whatever stage it's in, if it's infancy and in the crib, if it's in the fetal position, if it's in a dark closet never to be seen from, where it is standing at the moment, and if you think we will ever see this expand to 8 before the 2026 contracts are up?
Yeah, that's where I am, in that you probably won't see it before the contracts are up. First of all, I think there is a simple timing portion of this. If they really are serious about expanding it before 2026, they got to start thinking about that now. Like that process needs to start happening. You have dates that are already locked in for the semifinals and finals. So anything that's going to be done before then needs to work around the dates that are already locked in there. So that's a big hurdle. Like, there is just a lot of stuff in place to wedge it in over the next few years that you can't just snap your fingers. That there's going to be a lot of work to do. So my feeling is they won't expand it before the end of the contract, simply because if they're not serious about it by now, and I don't think there's enough people who are really serious about it, then it's not getting done. I've said, James, I think the playoff will change when the people change. And what I mean by that is
one of them changed.
I'm sorry?
One of them changed. Delaney's out, so that helps.
Exactly. No, and that's exactly it. And it's not just because of changes of, like, part of it is change of attitude, change of perception, change of, just a different perspective. Change of perspective. Hey, I'm coming to this with new ideas and a new perspective. Part of it is that. Part of it is people who want to do this work. Like, I don't know if Sankey and Swafford and Bowlesby, the guys who got it to this point, want to be the guys to go back to the drawing table and redo it. Now, Sankey's a young guy. He's going to be here for a while. I don't know how much longer Swafford's going to be in this game. He's in his late 60s. It may even be 70, quite frankly. He's done a great job, but I don't know how much longer he's going to be ACC commissioner. Bowlesby is, in his 60s, and I don't know if he's going to be up for another round of this come, 2026 or 2027. So I do wonder if when we have some new blood in those commissioners' chairs, and who knows what the status of Scott is long term, if those guys then come, or gals, which would be, irrelevatory, come into the room and say, listen, we're gun-ho to change this thing. We are ready to do the work and come up with the next system, and we're going to put our stamp on it, because that's part of it too. It's not just how much work it will be. It's also, and having a different perspective. It's really wanting to do the work. These commissioners have other jobs. They have other tasks that they need to do.
For sure, and we'll get you out of here on this, Ralph, and again, appreciate it. What was your view of the two polar opposite games of the Pac-12 this past weekend? One, you have Oregon-Stanford, which was a grinding game that I perfectly understand, especially the way that Stanford plays. And covering it on Saturday, I said, all right, well, that's what they do, and we're in a grinding game. That's what we're watching here today. And Oregon wins as a 2-touchdown favorite, but this fan base, if it's not 35-plus points on offense and everything spectacular, boy, the masses here are very, very upset with the outcome offensively. Whereas on the other opposite extreme, it's Pac-12 After Dark special to the nth degree, broken scoreboards in Pullman, and no defense whatsoever, boneheaded coaching decisions, turnovers galore. But, boy, if you love that kind of style, you got 130 points and rewriting the record books. What is your view of those two polar opposite extremes and outcomes within this league this past weekend?
Well, personally, I think it's good for the league to have a little sort of diversity in it. Frankly, I mean, if it's all going to be exploding scoreboards, it becomes a little hard to take it seriously. Listen, I would tell you, if I'm an Oregon fan, I understand the perspective of an Oregon fan because they have come to power by lighting up scoreboards. But I would think that was incredibly encouraging to sort of win a game like that. And even though the Auburn, I understand they lost the Auburn game, but the Auburn game was a little grindy, right? And the fact that they played pretty well, I understand they let one slip away. But, to me, that sort of suggests a team that is capable of doing big things, because you're capable of saying, okay, we're going to go face this team that is kind of grindy, and we're going to grind them, and we're just going to grind them to bits. For so many years, it was Stanford with the ability to do that, right? So you sort of Stanforded Stanford. The most interesting thing about the other game was you just wonder if that's the beginning of something interesting for Chip Kelly. Is that a mirage, or was this sort of a turning point moment? I know a lot of people want to think it might be, or sort of play it as it could be, but that's totally TBD. I mean, that game got off the hook at a certain point, so I don't know what was real out of that circus. But it would be interesting to see if it turns out that was something of a pivot point for Kelly at UCLA.
Appreciate it, Ralph. Certainly hope to see you out here in Eugene or elsewhere in the Pac-12 throughout the season, whether it's in a couple of weeks with Oregon hosting Cal. If Cal is able to beat Arizona State, that could be a pretty big national game in a couple of weeks on Fox, or whether it be later up in Seattle at Washington. Do hope to cross paths with you before May and spring meetings, my friend.
That sounds like a great plan. Hope we can make that happen.
Appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. You're listening to the James Crepea Show on Fox Sports Eugene. It is time to find out who got sauced.
Oh, my God, I'm a victim.
Who had the worst week? It's time for the James Crepea Show to find out.
It's so unfair.
Who got sauced?
What?
Call 541-343-KORE and tell us who had the worst week for your chance to win a $25 gift card from Chicken Bones. Chicken with an attitude.
So who had the worst week, Steve? Who had the worst week?
Against the spread, it was Steve Mims. So
yes,
I'm not feeling so bad there. But
yes.
Are you referring to overall over the weekend?
Anywhere out there?
Okay, for me, it's got to be the quarterback from Washington State, Gordon.
Anthony Gordon. To end up on the losing end of that with 9 touchdowns is
9 touchdown passes and lose. But not only that, to add injury to insult or insult to injury, to not get Pac-12 Player of the Week.
Again, don't look at me.
For 9 touchdown passes.
I voted for him. I don't know what other people did. Clearly they didn't, but I did.
So that's mine. That's mine.
I'd say when you are a 99.9% chance to win, as ESPN's win probability calculator said, twice was the case for Washington State. Twice. At 42-17 and 49-17, they were a 99.9% chance to win.
They're actually showing on ESPNU right now a repeat of the game.
Right.
And it is at the 6:56 mark.
At exactly this moment,
Yeah.
they had a 99.9% chance to win according to ESPN's win probability calculator.
Because it's 42-17,
So at that point,
and they've got first and goal.
I think at that point, it's Wazoo in some way, whether it's the Wazoo defense, whether it's Mike Leach, who on one hand stuck to his identity in a lot of ways, and on another hand, the bottom line is you can't lose that game. You cannot lose that game. A 49-17, you can't lose at home.
No.
In the second half to a team that had no pulse, that had no reason to give a damn, that had no reason to play well. You cannot let that team come back and beat you.
A team that was beaten down in their first.
Right.
It's just.
It was awful. That said, there were other candidates. I think Jim Harbaugh would be a fine pick.
I agree.
Because, my goodness, not pretty for him. Again, my pick might actually be Oregon fans who are expecting a ton of points. They might have had apparently they had a very, very terrible, no good, very bad weekend after a 21-6 win over Stanford. But if you ask them, they had the worst weekend of all. We will chat with Nick Daschel coming up momentarily. We heard from Jonathan Smith earlier today. He gave an injury update. We'll certainly chat with Nick about that. But quickly, here's what Jonathan Smith had to say on the injury front, starting with Jamar Jefferson and Tyjon Lindsey.
We were optimistic on both of them. Yeah, they're moving around a whole lot better. Plan on them getting some reps. Tyjon got some reps yesterday. We knew the plan for Jamar was to get some reps tomorrow, and so we'll kind of see how that is. So we're optimistic, both those guys.
And with Jordan Whitley and Nathan Eldridge.
Whitley practiced yesterday, so we're counting on him on Saturday. Eldridge has not practiced. You know how those ankles are. We'll have a better idea by the end of the week.
So there are your main injury updates from Jonathan Smith. We'll chat about that and more with Nick Daschel of the Oregonian coming up. You're listening to the James Crepea Show on Fox Sports Eugene. We welcome back to the program my colleague for the Oregonian and OregonLive, Nick Daschel, covers Oregon State, who will be coming off a bye week this past week and heading into a pretty big home game with Stanford, a reeling Stanford team at 1-3 coming into Corvallis. And it's certainly an opportunity for the Beavers to potentially get what would be, let's face it, it would be an early signature win for Jonathan Smith if they were able to accomplish it this weekend. Welcome back to the show, Nick.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Let's start with the injury front. We played the audio from the press conference of Jonathan Smith giving the updates on Jamar and Tyjon Lindsey, Jordan Whitley, Nathan Eldridge. He certainly seems optimistic on Jamar and Tyjon and Jordan in particular. What would it mean to this team to have all those pieces back into a game where, like I say, this would be if ever there was a time to get Stanford in this position, it's this time. And they are as close to healthy as they're going to be, given the guys who are out for the remainder of the season. But Stanford's coming in as only a 3-point favorite to an Oregon State team that has shown some signs of offense, and its defense certainly has done better the past couple of games than it did to start the season. What would it mean if this injury report holds true and these guys are back and maybe Eldridge isn't? What will it mean to the Beavers?
Well, it's significant in that, those three guys are meaningful players. Jefferson's obviously proven to be one of the better backs in the league, but I don't think they drop off too much when they go to Pierce. It's just you like to have your two best guys. So, Lindsey's probably the guy that interests me. Well, he and Whitley probably interest me the most because they really need a second. They need a second guy to start taking some of the pressure off of Hodgins because teams are just going to start taking him out of the game pretty soon if all they have is Hodges. And I know they have more than that, but these guys prove it. Lindsey caught 8 balls in the first game, but he didn't do much against Hawaii, and obviously didn't play against Cal Poly. But he's shown the ability, so they need him, as one of those guys to step up as the number 2 receiver. Whitley, he plays about half the game. He's in about half the snaps, and he makes a big difference when he's in the middle and against a physical Stanford team. That'll mean something, because you would think that Oregon State is going to try to limit Stanford's running game as much as they can. I don't think they can make Costello one-dimensional like Oregon can. I just don't know if they're capable of doing that with their run defense. But they'll try to do as much as possible and make Costello beat him with his arm. And Whitley would help out there a lot, because he's shown the ability to get in the backfield and cause some trouble. So I would say, all 3 are big, but especially Lindsey and Whitley.
If Eldridge can't go, Nick, what does that mean to that O-line? Because you mentioned, look, Stanford just played I know the first 3 games were not great defensively, and that's why a lot of Oregon fans were disappointed with a 21-6 win. But they did just play pretty well defensively against Oregon outside of, all right, yeah, they had a couple of busts that led to touchdowns, but otherwise they created some pass rush, and they were able to contain C.J. Verdell in that ground game at times. What would it mean to Oregon State if Nate Eldridge is not able to go?
Well, yeah, and I don't think he's going to go. I'll be surprised if he does. He hasn't practiced, and he's still hobbling around. But they don't really drop off significantly with the backup, because Eldridge and I always butcher his name, Kean Bottom. They battled all the way through camp, and Kean Bottom actually started against Oklahoma State. I don't really think they drop on that bad. And the line's actually been a pretty good bright spot for this team so far. It's a little bit underrated even. They've really picked up the pace in terms of protecting for Jake Luton over a year ago. I mean, it doesn't look like they've dropped off at all with their run blocking, and as long as they their health stays up. And last year they were pretty amazing with their health. They really didn't lose anybody up front at all, and so it's been the case with Eldridge. And Eldridge he came in with some injury problems, so they knew that could be an issue. So far, the other 4 guys have held up pretty well. So I don't know that Eldridge, losing him would be a big deal. It would be a big deal if the other guy goes down, though. Then they're down to a third center. So from that standpoint, Eldridge would be good to have back.
Some of the other players that Oregon State is dealing with as far as potentially longer-term issues, I know you tackled this during the bye week, Nick, with Trevin Bradford, a senior receiver, does have a red shirt available if need be. And safety David Morris has missed the past couple of games with some foot issues. Do you think, and Bradford seems out this week, you reported earlier, if he's missed at this point, this would be, my goodness, we're 5 weeks into the season. Do you think that one or both of these guys end up taking red shirts to come back and give this another go?
Well, in Bradford's case, he definitely does have a redshirt year available to him, since this is his 4th year in the program, and he played his first 3 years. I haven't talked to Trayvon about whether he would want to come back for a 5th year if that's available to him, but I would guess probably would be, because he doesn't scream NFL draft pick at this point, so I would think he'd want to come back. But there's still I would say if he doesn't play by Utah, which is the 6th game, I'd say it's pretty likely that they'll sit on him and just play him 4 games and see if they can get him to come back next year. With Morris, he took a red shirt last year because of his foot issues, and it just sounds like this is one of those situations where I don't know. Every time he starts working out, the foot thing flares up again, and he's just got bad feet, and they've worked on him with orthotics and all this other stuff. But I don't know. I mean, it's just one of those things. We'll just have to see, how it shakes out with him. And it's too bad because he was really good as a freshman, and if he does come back, he'd make a difference. But at this point, I think it's just speculation as to whether he'll be able to get on the field this season.
We mentioned, Nick, that if ever there was a time to get Stanford, if you're Oregon State amid a rebuild, this certainly seems like the year, given that Stanford is, albeit with a senior quarterback, and a damn good one at that with KJ Costello, amid a little bit of a rebuild of its own in some ways, and certainly has some really, really young players in the secondary who are having a tough go at times. Paulson Adebo, when he's matched up on Isaiah Hodgins, will be, frankly, to be much-watched television. That's one of the best receivers in the league against probably the best corner in the league when they're playing at their best. But outside of that, there's a lot of warts on that Stanford defense at times, other than, schematically how they approach some things. I don't want to say pressure exactly, Nick, because that's unfair to the state of the rebuild at Oregon State at the moment, but it's definitely one of the bigger home games they have left on the schedule. And it is certainly appears to be a winnable game. You mentioned the line; it opened at 5 or 5.5. It moved down to 3. Do you think there is, again, whether you want to call it pressure or just a general feeling out there from within the program and outside of it, that this is a game that this staff and the way that they're trying to build things right now, they really need this one to try and validate a lot that they got going on? Maybe it's UCLA the following week, but that's a road game. But that this is a team that, even if Stanford plays possession, frankly, that might work in Oregon State's favor if it's a lower scoring game, if it ends up being played that way. That this is a game there that's there to be had, and that there could be certainly a great opportunity in front of them.
Yeah, I mean, you would look at the rest, what they have the rest of the way, and there's 4 or 5 games that, if they play well, they've got a shot. I don't know if they're putting any pressure on themselves necessarily at this point. I think this year is more about, showing they can compete with most of the teams on their schedule, and if they can get in a position to win, they'd certainly love to win the game. And of course, they go into every game thinking they're going to win, but the whole thing with the Stanford game comes down to can Oregon State's defensive front hold up against Stanford? If Stanford just wants to just rear back and play smash mouth for 4 quarters, can Oregon State hold up against that? Because that's kind of what even last year Arizona, everybody thought, oh boy, Arizona, people were just rubbing their hands. Oh, Arizona, they're a team Oregon State could take out, and Arizona just came in and ran it down their throat for 4 quarters, and Oregon State was never really into a game, even though it was a 35 to 21 or 14 game, but you never got the impression Oregon State was in the game because Arizona just controlled them with their power, and I could see Stanford doing the same thing unless Oregon State shows this is a different team this year. So that's kind of the interesting storyline, for Saturday, I think. And
that, is the same. I was going to ask that exact question, so you framed it perfectly there. We'll get you out of here on this, Nick. We've been chatting with Nick Daschel, my colleague at the Oregonian and OregonLive, covers Oregon State. Does a great job doing that. To switch gears to basketball for a moment, because during the bye week last week, you were able to delve into that a little bit, and the Beavers men's basketball team gets practice underway here this week, as do the Ducks later in the week. You got to talk to Trey Tinkle about him coming back for another go, and certainly optimistic and hoping to reach the NCAA tournament. What were your takeaways from your conversation with him, and what your off-season impressions as they're about to open practice, the Beavers, preseason practice for men's basketball?
Well, I'm actually working right now on a pretty long Q&A with Wayne Tinkle that we talked about. I'll post that in the morning. He'll have something on he talks about every player on the roster and whatnot. I think they're pretty excited about this freshman class they have coming in. Yeah, I know they like Jared Lucas. He's a guy that could come right in and be Stevie Thompson, and maybe even a more tougher kind of player. And they need some of these guys to be a little bit tougher. But I know they like this freshman class. And Kyler Kelly put on a little bit of weight, and he's much more of a physical presence. And I think, offensively, he's got a year under his belt. When they got the ball to him inside, he knew what to do with it last year. They just, he got in foul trouble a little bit too much, and I think he's going to be much improved. They got Peyton Daschel, who's a guy that transferred from BYU, sat out last year, but he went through all the practices. And he's a guy that's, I think he's 24. He's on the older side, and he'll give him some minutes inside. Well, actually, he'll play more outside, but he's 6'10", and he's a stretch 4. They're as veteran a team as you're going to find in the Pac-12 this year. Now, whether they're good enough, I don't know, but they're as veteran as you're going to find in the league, and they've got, in Tinkle, they've got a guy that's, he's on the short list for Player of the Year. There's, it's probably 4 or 5 guys you could say going into the season. So, I mean, they got experience. They got a couple of really good players. They got a nice freshman class. We'll see. I think they're, quietly thinking this is they got to run at the NCAA tournament this year. Whether they get there, they have a non-league schedule that's gonna test them. They got Iowa State at home. They got Oklahoma. They got Texas A&M. They got Wyoming on the road. It's a pretty good non-league schedule they got coming up.
Look forward to chatting about that and more with you in the weeks ahead, Nick. Thanks again for joining us.
All right, we'll see you.
You're listening to the James Crepea Show on Fox Sports Eugene. Forgot to mention earlier the October 5th Pac-12 game times. So starting with Oregon, Cal, yes, 5 o'clock on Fox on October the 5th. Oregon State at UCLA, 6 o'clock on Pac-12 Network. The other 2 games, Arizona at Colorado, 1:30 Pacific Time, Pac-12 Network. Washington at Stanford, 7:30 on ESPN. That's your Pac-12 After Dark special on October the 5th. The other games of interest that day, setting up your television dial, basically, for tune-in purposes. Auburn at Florida, another game that's very important to Ducks fans, 12:30 CBS. Georgia at Tennessee is the lead-in on ESPN to the Washington at Stanford game. Michigan State, Ohio State is at 4:30 on either ABC or ESPN. And Fox, it is a triple header. So it starts Iowa at Michigan early. That's 9 a.m. out here on the West Coast. Northwestern at Nebraska. And then those are the 2 games that lead into Cal at Oregon on October the 5th. So that's your television slate for a couple of weeks from now. Some news from around the college football world. But actually, before we get into that, last chance to get in your picks for Who Got Sauce. Give us a call on the Davis Roofing Hotline, 541-343-KORE. That's 541-343-5673. Give us your pick for who had the worst week. If you give us the best pick, by our judgment, we will give you a $25 gift card to Chicken Bones, so you get a free dinner out of the deal. So again, give us a call, 541-343-KORE. News from around the college football world, starting in college sports world. 2, on a rather tragic note, former Texas Tech basketball All-American Andre Emmett played earlier in the 2000s for Texas Tech, and Bob Knight fatally shot in Dallas. He was 37. Former Ole Miss and Texas quarterback Javon Sneed, a highly touted recruit a few years ago, he was found dead in Austin, Texas Saturday night. Sneed just 32 years of age. On a more positive note, relatively speaking, but injury-wise for Utah, already mentioned Tyler Huntley and Zach Moss, both hurt at USC. Their statuses for this weekend's game against Washington State unspecified. Kyle Whittingham not getting into details there. Also, Utah note, scheduling a home-and-home series with Florida to be played in 2022 and 2023. Gainesville in 22, Salt Lake City in 23.
That'll be good.
Ohio State safety Isaiah Pryor, the transfer, former 4-star recruit out of IMG Academy, originally out of Georgia. Tomorrow's guest, Barrett Sallee of CBS Sports, will join us again. Andrew Nemec of the Oregonian and Oregon Live covering recruiting. You're listening to the James Crepea Show on Fox Sports Eugene. Hit the lights and lock the doors.